The evening was perfect, which should have been my first warning. This story might hit close to home for anyone who's ever had their world shattered on what should have been a moment of celebration. Watch until the end. Healing comes in the most unexpected moments. Perfect October air, crisp enough to make the wine taste sharper, warm enough to let us linger in the backyard without jackets. Perfect light, too. Those amber string lights Lena had insisted on hanging from the maple branches last summer, casting everyone in a gentle glow that softened edges and forgave flaws. Even the timing felt scripted. Sunset bleeding into that blue hour, when voices grow quieter, when stories stretch longer, when friendship feels deeper than it might in the harsh light of noon. 40 years old today, 4 decades of breathing, of taking up space in this world. The number itself didn't trouble me. I'd never been one to fear aging. What unsettled me, standing there in my own backyard surrounded by the handful of people I called friends, was how little I felt changed by time. Shouldn't 40 years have transformed me into someone more substantial? Someone with convictions that ran deeper than the shallow roots of the annuals Lena replanted each spring. Happy birthday, man. Theo's hand landed on my shoulder, his fingers digging in slightly, as though anchoring me to the present. My younger brother, eternally more vibrant than me, eternally trying to pull me toward the surface of my own life. You doing okay? You've got that 1,000-yard stare going. Just thinking, I said, raising my glass toward him. Hazard of the profession. God forbid an English teacher should ever stop analyzing long enough to enjoy his own party. He grinned, but his eyes held that familiar concern. The silent, "Are you really here?" That had become his unspoken refrain over the years. I smiled back, made myself focus on him, on the moment. I'm good, really. Across the yard, Lena moved between our guests with the practiced grace that still, occasionally, stole my breath. Her dark hair caught the fairy lights, her laugh carried over the murmur of conversation. She wore the dress I'd always loved, deep blue, simple, elegant. In 20 years of marriage, I'd never told her how I felt when she wore that dress. One of countless silences I'd let stretch between us, comfortable in my admiration until comfort became complacency, became distance. Mrs. Calvert sat in the cushioned patio chair we'd set aside for her, sipping what I knew was definitely not her first glass of Cabernet. Her weathered hands gestured animatedly as she spoke with Sarah Lynn from school. I couldn't hear their conversation, but Sarah's quiet laugh drifted toward me. She caught my eye briefly and raised her glass, a small acknowledgement that warmed me inexplicably. "You've created something beautiful here, Owen," Theo said, his voice softer now. "You know that, right?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure what he meant specifically. The home, the gathering, the life. I'd never been the architect of these things, just their willing inhabitant. Lena created, I appreciated. Lena reached, I received. The pattern of our marriage, unremarkable until suddenly, catastrophically, it wasn't. "Cake time," Lena called, and conversations paused as she emerged from the kitchen with what I could now see was an impressively elaborate chocolate creation, 40 small candles creating a galaxy of light in the deepening dusk. Our guests gathered closer, their faces warm in the glow, and began that strange ritual of singing to an adult who can only stand there, awkwardly accepting the attention, waiting for permission to end it with a symbolic extinguishing of light. I closed my eyes before I blew out the candles, made no wish, felt Lena standing close beside me, the familiar scent of her perfume, jasmine, and something deeper I'd never been able to name. When I opened my eyes, she was watching me with an expression I couldn't read, something complicated happening behind her eyes. "Before we cut the cake," she said quietly, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands, "I have something for you." She placed an envelope in front of me, cream-colored and unremarkable. For a suspended moment, no one moved. The paper felt unexpectedly heavy in my hands, as though it contained more than just sheets of paper. When I opened it, the world narrowed to the legal letterhead, the formal language, the cold precision of what it was asking of me, of us. Divorce papers. On my 40th birthday, with chocolate frosting still waiting to be cut. I heard Theo's sharp intake of breath beside me, felt the collective discomfort ripple outward from where Lena and I stood. The guests suddenly transformed into unwilling witnesses to something raw and private. "Lena," I said, my voice distant to my own ears, "what is this?" A foolish question. I knew exactly what it was. "I'm sorry about the timing," she said, and I could see she meant it. I tried to find the right moment. There isn't one. The party collapsed inward after that, a star imploding into awkward goodbyes and averted gazes. I remember fragments more than a coherent narrative. Mrs. Calvert squeezing my hand wordlessly as she left. Sarah Lynn's face, composed but troubled. Theo trying to stay, to talk, and my hand on his shoulder gently pushing him toward the door. "Not now," I told him. "Please." When everyone had gone, Lena and I stood in our kitchen, the ruins of the party spread between us. Half-empty glasses, abandoned plates, the cake now absurd in its festiveness. "I should have waited until tomorrow," she said. "That was cruel, and I'm sorry for it." "Would tomorrow have been better?" I asked, not unkindly. Just curious, detached, as though we were discussing the weather or some minor schedule change. "No," she admitted, "but this wasn't fair to our friends." Our friends. Already she was dividing the world into what we would share and what we wouldn't. I nodded, unable to articulate anything beyond simple acknowledgement. "I'll be staying at Elise's for a few days," she continued, "to give you space. I've already packed some things." I hadn't noticed the suitcase by the door. How had I missed something so obvious, so significant? "You don't have to leave tonight," I said, the words hollow even to myself. She smiled then, sad and certain. "Yes, I do. We both know that." After she left, I wandered through our home like a ghost haunting his own life. Every room felt both familiar and strange, as though the physical space itself had shifted slightly, recalibrating around her absence. In the living room, I stopped in front of our record collection, mostly mine, though Lena had added her own over the years. My fingers found what they were looking for without conscious direction. Coltrane's A Love Supreme. The first album I'd played for her, 22 years ago in my cramped college apartment, both of us pretending I hadn't chosen it specifically to impress her. The needle found its groove, and saxophone notes spilled into the empty house, plaintive and searching. I sank into the armchair Lena had reupholstered last spring, closed my eyes, and let myself drift backward through the years. Every relationship has its creation myth, the story we tell about how we began. Ours started in a bookstore, me shelving returns during my part-time job, Lena browsing poetry with serious intensity. She'd asked for Neruda, and I'd led her to the right shelf, surprised when she selected the original Spanish edition. "You read Spanish?" I'd asked, immediately feeling foolish for stating the obvious. "My mother is from Chile," she'd answered with a smile that transformed her face from pretty to luminous. "Poetry makes more sense in its native language." I'd nodded as though I understood, though my own relationship with language had always been more academic than visceral. I analyzed texts. Lena inhabited them. It was the first of many differences I would come to both admire and, eventually, fail to bridge. The night stretched on, Coltrane giving way to silence, silence giving way to the soft sounds of an empty house settling. At some point, I found myself back in the yard, the fairy lights now switched off, the darkness complete except for distant street lamps and the waxing moon. The grass was damp with evening dew beneath my feet. I stood where we had gathered hours earlier and tried to understand how a life could crack apart so quietly, with so little resistance. Had I known? Had some part of me sensed the fractures spreading beneath the surface of our marriage? I thought of Lena's increasing silences over dinner, her weekend trips to visit her sister becoming more frequent. The way she'd stopped asking me about my days at school, stopped sharing the small frustrations and triumphs of her work at the community center. I had attributed it to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, the comfortable silences, the predictable rhythms. Now I wondered if what I'd called comfort had actually been surrender. If what I'd interpreted as peace had really been resignation. In the shadows of our yard, I remembered the dress she'd worn tonight, how it had always been my favorite, though I'd never told her. How many other appreciations had I kept to myself? How many observations, desires, fears had I swallowed in the name of maintaining an emotional status quo neither of us had consciously chosen? The night air carried the scent of wood smoke from a neighbor's chimney, the sweet decay of fallen leaves. Autumn had always been my favorite season, not for its beauty, but for its honesty. Nothing hides in autumn. Everything is revealed in the process of letting go. I slept on the couch that night, unwilling to face our bed alone. Dreams came in fragments, Lena smiling across a table in a restaurant we hadn't visited in years, the cake with its galaxy of candles transforming into actual stars. My classroom empty of students, papers scattered across desks like abandoned thoughts. Morning arrived with painful brightness. I made coffee out of habit, pouring a second cup before remembering there was no one to drink it. The kitchen counter still held the birthday cake, untouched after the candles had been blown out. A small plastic figure stood atop it, a gardener with tiny shears, Lena's nod to my weekend passion. I removed it carefully, wiped away the frosting, and placed it on my desk in the small study where I prepared lessons and occasionally pretended to write the novel I'd been contemplating for a decade. I threw the rest of the cake away, watching as the careful layers of chocolate and raspberry disappeared into the trash. 40 years reduced to discarded sweetness, to empty cups, to the small plastic figure of a man tending a garden that couldn't possibly sustain him. That was yesterday. This morning. A lifetime ago. I've been sitting in this quiet house for hours now, watching as daylight shifts across the walls, illuminating dust motes and empty spaces where Lena's favorite photographs once hung. Already, she has begun the process of disentanglement, of extraction. Already, I am becoming a before rather than a present. The phone has rung several times. I've let it go to voicemail. Theo, most likely, checking in. Perhaps the school, wondering about my Monday classes. The world continuing its forward motion, while I remain suspended in the moment of revelation, in the quiet catastrophe of being handed divorce papers beneath fairy lights on an October evening that smelled of wood smoke and endings. Tomorrow, I will need to move again, to teach, to respond, to navigate this new geography of absence. But for now, I sit with the silence, with the strange relief of no longer needing to pretend that everything is fine. Because nothing is fine. Nothing has been fine for longer than I've been willing to admit. And in that admission, that first reluctant step toward honesty, I feel something unexpected stir beneath the numbness. Not healing, not yet, but perhaps its distant, necessary prelude. The afternoon light has begun its slow retreat when I finally rise from the chair where I've spent most of the day. My limbs feel wooden, disconnected from my will. In the kitchen, the empty coffee cup sits abandoned, a perfect circle of dried brown staining its bottom. I've been sitting so long that time has transformed liquid to residue, presence to evidence. The voicemail light on the phone blinks with mechanical persistence. I press play, steeling myself for concerned voices, for questions I'm not ready to answer. "Owen, it's me." Lena's voice, steady despite a slight breathlessness. "I know this is difficult. I'm going to stop by tomorrow afternoon to get some more of my things. I'd prefer to do it while you're at school, but I wanted to let you know. I hope you're okay. I hope—" A pause, laden with unspoken complications. "Just call if you need anything." I delete the message without saving it. The mechanical voice asks if I want to listen to the next message. I press delete again without listening. And again. And again. Theo, probably. The department head wondering about my Monday classes. Mrs. Calvert checking in. Connections I cannot bear to maintain, at least not today. Outside, the sky has begun to darken toward evening, though it's barely 4 o'clock. I should eat something, should plan tomorrow's lessons, should call the school and explain— what, exactly? That my wife served me divorce papers on my birthday, and now I'm unraveling like a poorly knitted sweater, one loose thread pulling until the entire garment dissolves? Instead, I find myself drawn to the record collection again. Not to play music this time, but to reorganize, to impose order on something I can control. I begin pulling albums from the shelves, laying them out chronologically by release date. It's a project I've contemplated for years, but never found time to complete. Now time stretches before me, empty and shapeless. Hours pass in meticulous sorting. I clean each vinyl with careful precision, inspect covers for wear, rediscover forgotten favorites. The physical engagement keeps my mind tethered to simple tasks: categorize, clean, replace. When thoughts of Lena or questions about the future begin to surface, I redirect my attention to the texture of cardboard under my fingertips, the satisfying weight of records in my hands. Halfway through the project, I realize I'm hungry. The kitchen offers little inspiration. We were due for grocery shopping today. Sunday had always been our shared errands day, a small domestic ritual neither of us particularly enjoyed, but which we'd made tolerable together. I settle for toast with the last scraping of almond butter from the jar, eating while standing at the counter like a visitor in my own home. Sleep comes in erratic bursts that night, my body jerking awake from dreams I can't remember, but which leave me sweating and disoriented. By dawn, I've moved from the couch to the bedroom floor, a blanket wrapped around me like a shroud. Outside, early morning fog blurs the neighbors' houses into watercolor suggestions of themselves. I shower, dress, pack my leather satchel with ungraded papers. The familiar weight of it across my shoulder provides momentary comfort, the physical embodiment of a life I still recognize. But as I start the car, as I prepare to rejoin the current of my daily routine, something inside me rebels. I cannot face my classroom today, cannot stand before 30 teenagers and discuss Frost's diverging roads when my own path has suddenly, violently narrowed. Cannot answer well-intentioned questions about my weekend, about the birthday party several of them knew was planned. Instead, I drive aimlessly, eventually finding myself at Ridgepoint Park, a place Lena and I often walked on summer evenings. The parking lot is empty this Monday morning, the trails quiet, but for the occasional jogger or dog walker. I follow the familiar loop around the pond, my thoughts moving in similar circles. When had it begun, this quiet dissolution? Had there been a moment I could pinpoint, some word unsaid, some touch withheld that started us down this path? Or had our marriage always contained the seeds of its own undoing, two fundamentally different people, joined by passion that eventually cooled to habit? I remember our 3rd anniversary, the small restaurant in Providence, where Lena had asked about children for the first time. How carefully she'd approached the subject, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, eyes focused there rather than on my face. "I've been thinking," she'd said, her voice deliberately casual, about what our family might look like if we expanded it. I'd frozen, the asparagus spear on my fork suspended halfway to my mouth. Not because I opposed the idea, I'd always assumed children would be part of our future, but because the concrete reality of it suddenly terrified me. Parenthood had seemed like a distant, theoretical country, and now Lena was suggesting we apply for passports. Maybe we should wait another year or two, I'd finally answered. Get more financially stable, finish the house renovations. She'd nodded, smiled, changed the subject. But something had shifted between us that night, some expected path diverged from. We never discussed it directly again, though the subject hovered in the margins of conversations about spare bedrooms and life insurance. Eventually, time had made the decision for us, our silence on the matter calcifying into acceptance. Had that been the beginning? That quiet deferral, that mutual retreat from difficult truth? The sun has fully burned through the morning fog by the time I complete the trail loop. I check my watch, 10:30. Lena will be at the house now, collecting her things in my absence. I should feel something about this, anger, perhaps, or the urgent need to return home and witness this dismantling. Instead, I feel a peculiar detachment, as though watching a play about someone else's life. I drive to the Riverside Diner, a place Lena and I frequented early in our marriage when we lived in the small apartment downtown. The hostess seats me at a window booth, and I order coffee and nothing else, earning a disapproving look that I pretend not to notice. The diner hasn't changed in 20 years. Same faded vinyl booths, same specks of glitter embedded in the tabletops, same slightly sticky menus. I remember weekend mornings here, Lena with sections of the newspaper spread before her, me with a book I was teaching the following week. The comfortable silence we shared then had felt like connection. When had it transformed into distance? Owen? Owen Marlowe? I look up to find Sarah Lynn standing beside my table, a takeout bag in her hand. Her dark hair is pulled back in a neat bun, her expression a careful mix of concern and uncertainty. Sarah, I say, surprised at how rusty my voice sounds. Hi. I thought that was you. She hesitates, then gestures to the empty seat across from me. May I? Just for a minute? I nod, suddenly aware of how strange I must look, unshaven, hollow-eyed, sitting alone in a diner on a Monday morning when I should be teaching American poetry to drowsy sophomores. The faculty meeting, she says, settling across from me. We missed you. I'm taking a sick day, I reply, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Sarah nods, not quite meeting my eyes. Mr. Bryant wanted me to drop off some departmental paperwork for you. He said it's not urgent. She places a folder on the table between us, then adds softly, Everyone understands, Owen. The simple kindness in her voice nearly undoes me. I stare at the folder, at her carefully manicured nails, at anything but her face. Thank you, I manage. I'll be back tomorrow. No rush, she says. We've got it covered. A pause, then. Daniel Woodson asked about you today. He quoted that thing you always say about Frost, how he wasn't writing about big dramatic choices, but about the small decisions that end up defining us. Something tightens in my chest. Daniel Woodson, my quietest student, the one who never volunteers, but whose essays reveal depths of understanding that sometimes startle me. The idea that he'd noticed, remembered, valued something I'd said pierces through my numbness like a sudden shaft of sunlight. That's good to know, I say inadequately. Sarah smiles, a gentle expression that carries no expectation. Well, I should get back. But Owen. She hesitates, seems to reconsider, then simply says, The staff room isn't the same without your terrible coffee jokes. After she leaves, I sit in the booth for another hour, nursing the same cup of coffee until it grows cold. The interaction with Sarah has shifted something in me, nudged me back toward the world of the living. I pay my bill and drive home, uncertain what I'll find, but suddenly needing to face whatever it might be. The house looks unchanged from the outside. Same faded blue siding, same maple tree with its bright autumn foliage, same stone path leading to the front door. Inside, however, the subtraction of Lena is immediately apparent. The painting that hung in the entryway, a watercolor of the Maine coastline we'd purchased on our honeymoon, has been removed, leaving a slightly darker rectangle on the wall. Her collection of pottery mugs no longer crowds the kitchen shelf. The woven blanket she kept on the living room couch, gone. I move through the rooms, cataloging absences. Her nightstand emptied of books and hand cream. The bathroom counter strangely spacious, without her array of moisturizers and makeup brushes. The closet with its newly vacant section, hangers clustered together like mourners. In the garden, I sit on the bench beneath the crabapple tree and watch shadows stretch across the grass. The fairy lights still hang from the maple branches, now dormant without electricity to animate them. 3 days ago, they had illuminated a gathering of friends, a moment of celebration that collapsed into ending. Now they're just dead bulbs on a string, waiting to be taken down and packed away. "Owen? You home, dear?" Mrs. Calvert's voice carries over the fence separating our properties. I see her gray head appear above the wooden slats, her face creased with concern. "I'm here," I call back, surprised again at how foreign my own voice sounds. "I've made far too much soup," she says, her tone suggesting this is a completely spontaneous observation rather than the transparent pretext it clearly is. "Would you be a dear and help me with it? Herbert always said I could feed an army with my portions." Herbert Calvert has been dead for 12 years. Mrs. Calvert, Eleanor, though I've never used her first name, has lived alone next door for the entire time Lena and I have owned this house. She tends her garden with scientific precision, hosts monthly bridge games, and makes the best apple tarts in 3 counties. She has never, in all these years, accidentally overcooked. "I'm not very good company right now," I warn her as I make my way to the garden gate. "Good company is overrated," she replies briskly. "Honest company is far more valuable." Her kitchen smells of rosemary and thyme, of slow-cooked comfort. She gestures me toward the small table by the window while she ladles soup into earthenware bowls. No unnecessary words, no prying questions. Just the quiet certainty of routine. Soup made to be eaten, company arrived to share it. We eat in companionable silence for several minutes before she speaks. "Herbert left me, you know," she says matter-of-factly, breaking off a piece of crusty bread. "Before he died, walked out on 43 years of marriage 6 months before his heart attack." I nearly choke on my soup. "I didn't know that." "No reason you should. It was 7 years before you and Lena moved in." She stirs her soup thoughtfully. "Fell in love with a woman from his office. Said he'd been dead inside for years, and she made him feel alive again." A small, sad smile. The irony wasn't lost on me when he actually died half a year later. I don't know what to say to this revelation, so I focus on my soup, on the perfect balance of salt and herb, on the way steam rises from the surface in lazy curls. "I hated him for a long time," Mrs. Calvert continues. "Threw out every photograph, every gift he'd ever given me. Told our children they could choose, him or me." She shakes her head slightly. "That was cruel, and I've regretted it. But grief makes us selfish sometimes." "I'm not grieving," I say automatically. "We're just separating." Mrs. Calvert gives me a look that manages to be both compassionate and skeptical. "Grief isn't just for death, Owen. It's for any significant loss. And whether this separation becomes permanent or not, something has ended. It's natural to mourn that." The soup turns tasteless in my mouth. I set down my spoon, suddenly exhausted. I don't know what happened, I admit, the words emerging before I can consider them. I don't know when we stopped seeing each other. Mrs. Calvert nods as though this makes perfect sense. The quietest changes are often the most profound. One day you wake up and realize the silence that felt like peace was actually distance. Her words hit me with physical force. The silence that felt like peace. How many evenings had Lena and I spent in separate rooms, me with my books, her with her community center work, neither of us disturbing the quiet, both of us mistaking absence for tranquility. After Herbert died, Mrs. Calvert says, refilling my water glass without asking, I spent a lot of time thinking about those 43 years, the good and the bad, the children we raised, the home we built, the silences. She looks directly at me now. I realize something that might sound strange to you now, but perhaps won't always. Grief is just love with nowhere to land. We finish our meal quietly after that. When I try to help clean up, she shoos me away with firm insistence. Go home, Owen. Rest. Tomorrow is another day. Walking back to my house in the gathering twilight, I turn her words over in my mind. Grief is just love with nowhere to land. Is that what this hollow feeling is? Love suddenly airborne, circling, seeking solid ground. Inside, I notice something I missed earlier. A small framed object on my desk where there had been nothing before. I approach it carefully, as though it might disappear if observed too directly. It's the pressed flower I gave Lena on our first anniversary, a blue forget-me-not preserved between glass panes in a silver frame. I'd forgotten its existence, but she had kept it all these years. And now, in the careful selection of what to take and what to leave, she had chosen to return it to me. I sit at my desk, the small frame cradled in my palms, and finally allow the tears that have been building for 3 days. They come quietly at first, then in racking sobs that bend me forward over my knees. I cry for the young man who gave this flower to a woman he adored, but would ultimately fail. I cry for Lena, who tried for so long to reach me across the growing distance. I cry for the children we never had, the conversations never started, the emotions never expressed. When the tears finally subside, I feel hollowed out, but strangely clear, like a storm has passed through me and swept away debris I hadn't known was there. Outside, night has fully fallen. The neighbors' windows glow with warm light, lives continuing their forward motion, while mine has paused, reset, begun to reorient. Tomorrow, I will return to school. Will stand before my students and teach them about poetry, about the power of words to bridge the distances between people. Will drink bitter coffee in the staff room and attempt normalcy. But tonight, in this quiet house with its newly defined absences, I sit with the pressed forget-me-not and begin, slowly, to face what I have lost. Not just Lena, not just our marriage, but the version of myself that existed within it. The man who thought silence was enough, who believed presence without engagement was love. That man is gone now, dissolved in the quiet catastrophe of a cream-colored envelope. What remains, what begins, is still taking shape, still learning to breathe in this altered atmosphere of truth. Morning arrives with unexpected gentleness. I wake on the couch again, the empty frame still clutched in my hand, sunlight painting geometric patterns across the living room floor. For the first time in days, I feel something close to clarity. I shower, shave, dress for work. The routine feels both foreign and steadying, like visiting a childhood home, familiar in its bones, but different in its details. In the kitchen, I make coffee, toast, even pack a lunch. Small acts of self-preservation that yesterday would have seemed impossible. At school, I navigate the hallways with my gaze lowered, nodding at colleagues but avoiding conversation. My classroom welcomes me with its comfortable disorder. Books stacked on the windowsill, student essays awaiting feedback, the quote from Whitman I've kept on the board all semester. I am large, I contain multitudes. The day passes in a blur of lesson plans and student discussions. I speak about Frost's diverging roads with surprising eloquence, finding new meaning in words I've analyzed 100 times before. When Daniel Woodson makes a quiet but insightful comment about regret as a form of imagination, I meet his eyes and nod with genuine appreciation. Something passes between us, recognition, perhaps, of shared understanding. "Nice to have you back, Mr. Marlowe," he says as class ends. In the staff room at lunch, Sarah looks up from her salad with a smile. "You're here." "I'm here," I agree, settling into the chair across from her. "Thank you, by the way, for yesterday." She nods, requiring no elaboration. We eat in companionable silence, and I find myself noticing details about her I'd overlooked before. The small crescent scar near her temple, the way she tucks her hair behind her ear when concentrating, the book of poetry beside her lunch container. After school, I drive home with the windows down despite the chill, letting autumn air fill my lungs. The maple in our yard, my yard now, has begun dropping leaves in earnest, the grass beneath it carpeted in crimson and gold. I should rake them soon, though part of me wants to let them remain, to witness their natural decomposition. Inside, I move through the house with new purpose. I gather paper, pen, sit at my desk beside the small framed flower. Words have been my professional currency for decades, yet now they feel inadequate, clumsy tools for excavating truth. Still, I begin to write. Lena. This morning, I watched the sunrise from our living room couch and realized it's been years since I've done that. Years since I've really looked at anything, especially you. I've been thinking about that night in Providence, our 3rd anniversary, when you first mentioned children. You wore that jade necklace your mother gave you, and your eyes held such hope when you raised the subject. Hope that slowly dimmed as I retreated into practicalities and postponements. I've been thinking about all the conversations we never finished, all the silences I allowed to stretch between us, mistaking my comfort for connection. I've been wondering when exactly I stopped being present, when I decided that appreciating you from a distance was the same as loving you up close. This isn't a plea for reconciliation. I understand that what's broken between us can't be mended with a single letter or newfound awareness. But I needed to acknowledge, for both of us, that I see now what I couldn't, or wouldn't, see before. That your decision, painful as it was, came after years of trying to reach someone who had slowly, imperceptibly withdrawn. I wish you happiness, Lena. Not the quiet, resigned contentment I settled for, but real, vibrant joy. The kind I glimpsed in you when we first met, when poetry made more sense in its native language, and everything between us was still possibility. Owen. I don't mail the letter. Instead, I fold it carefully and place it in my desk drawer. The words weren't meant for Lena, not really. They were for me. An epitaph for the marriage we had, the marriage I failed to nurture. A week passes in small steps forward. I teach, grade papers, attend a faculty meeting where no one mentions my absence or the rumors that must surely be circulating. I call Theo finally, endure his gentle concern with more grace than I could have mustered days ago. I help Mrs. Calvert harvest the last of her tomatoes before frost claims them. On Saturday, Lena texts to ask if she can come by for her remaining boxes. I agree, suggest noon, spend the morning in the garden planting bulbs that won't bloom until spring, a small act of faith in future beauty. She arrives precisely at 12, hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a sweater I bought her 3 Christmases ago. We exchange cautious smiles, like travelers meeting in a foreign country where neither speaks the language fluently. "How are you?" she asks, following me inside. "Managing," I answer truthfully. "You?" "The same." She looks around the living room, now tidied, now partly empty. "You've been cleaning." Needed the distraction. We work in companionable silence, loading boxes into her car. Books, winter clothes, the small collection of antique perfume bottles her grandmother left her. The physical dismantling of our shared life nearly complete. As she prepares to leave, I remember the letter in my desk. On impulse, I retrieve it. "I wrote this," I say, holding it out to her. "Not to change anything, just to acknowledge some things." She takes it, her expression curious but not guarded. "Do you want me to read it now?" "No," I say quickly. "Later, when you're home." Lena nods, tucks the letter into her bag. Then, unexpectedly, she smiles. Not the sad, careful smile of recent days, but something closer to her true one, the one that first drew me to her in that bookstore 2 decades ago. "I saw that you kept the flower," she says. "You left it for me to find." "I didn't want you to forget," she says simply. After she leaves, I return to the garden, to the bulbs waiting to be planted. The rich smell of earth fills my senses as I dig small holes in precise rows. Tulips here, daffodils there, crocuses along the stone path. By the time they emerge, Lena and I will be legally divorced, our lives redirected onto separate paths. But something will bloom from this ending. Something must. The following week, I read the unsent letter to Mrs. Calvert over tea. She listens without interruption, her weathered hands cradling her cup, her eyes soft with understanding. "That's a good start, Owen," she says when I finish. "A start?" She smiles, the lines around her eyes deepening. "Toward saying the things that matter while they can still be heard. Toward living with your whole heart, not just the careful parts." I think about this as I walk home, autumn light gilding the neighborhood in temporary splendor. Living with my whole heart. The prospect is both terrifying and compelling, like standing at the edge of an unfamiliar wilderness. Winter arrives with quiet insistence. The divorce proceedings continue without drama. Lena and I meet occasionally to sign papers, divide assets, untangle the legal knots of 20 years together. We are cordial, sometimes even warm. Once, unexpectedly, we laughed together about a shared memory, a disastrous camping trip where everything that could go wrong did. The sound of our laughter in the attorney's office startles us both. At school, I find myself more engaged with my students than I've been in years. I revise lesson plans, assign more creative projects, stay after hours to help struggling seniors with college application essays. Sarah often stays late too, and sometimes we walk to the parking lot together, our conversations ranging from books to music to the small absurdities of academic life. On a frigid December afternoon, she appears at my classroom door with 2 coffee cups. "Thought you might need this. You've been grading essays for hours." I accept the coffee gratefully. "Thanks. I lost track of time." "You've been doing that a lot lately," she observes, leaning against the doorframe. "In a good way, I mean. You seem more present." The observation strikes me with unexpected force. Present. The quality I most lacked in my marriage, now noted by a colleague who has known me only in my absence. "I'm trying," I say simply. Sarah nods, understanding more than I've actually expressed. Some of us are meeting at Riverside Bookstore on Saturday. They're hosting a poetry reading. If you're interested. The invitation hangs between us, casual yet weighted with possibility. Not romance, it's far too soon for that, may always be, but connection. Engagement with the world beyond my grief. "I might be," I reply, and I am. Spring arrives eventually, as it always does. The bulbs I planted in autumn push through thawing earth, green shoots promising color to come. Mrs. Calvert and I drink coffee on her porch, watching robins build nests in the maple tree. Herbert would have been 82 today, she says conversationally. Do you still miss him? She considers this, her gaze distant. I miss what we had in our good years. I miss who I was when I loved him without reservation. But I've made peace with the ending. She pats my hand. You will too, Owen. Not today, maybe not this year, but someday. Later, I walk through my garden alone, inspecting the emerging bulbs, pulling early weeds. A Miles Davis album drifts through the open window. Not Coltrane, a deliberate choice. The sun warms my shoulders as I kneel in the soil, hands deep in the cool earth. The gate latch clicks, and I look up to see Sarah, a book tucked under her arm. Sorry to interrupt, she says. I was returning this. She holds out the poetry collection I'd lent her weeks ago. Keep it, I say, standing to brush dirt from my knees. I think it belongs with you now. She smiles, tucking the book back against her chest. I marked my favorite passages. Even better. We stand in companionable silence, the garden between us, the future unwritten. I don't know what the next chapter holds, for either of us, for anyone. But for the first time in months, perhaps years, I feel fully present in this moment, aware of its beauty and its transience, grateful for the pain that woke me and the healing that followed. Would you like some coffee? I ask. I just made a fresh pot. I'd like that, Sarah says. As we walk toward the house, I glance back at the garden, where green shoots promise eventual bloom. What remains? What begins? These questions no longer haunt me. I am here, now, alive in this imperfect moment. And for today, that is enough.